Hello again. Okay, so welcome back. This is the third podcast, and what we're going to do in this podcast is we're going to now sort of very much get into the chronology of the key events in what Turner, the American historian, called, his book was called The 30 Days to Power. Actually, with this podcast, we're just going to just take stock of the situation as it was in December 1932. And then in the next podcast, we'll sort of like pick up the story at the start of January 1933. Okay, so by means of a title for this podcast, I've called it Declining Morale Within the Nazi Party, Schleicher's Attempt to Split the Party, and then von Papen's Revenge. I suppose by means of a theme, something you need to sort of like very much develop in your essay, is the fact that it was not inevitable that Hitler's talents as a politician would get him into power. You can look at certain key points in the story of Hitler's rise to power and actually turn it around and see it in a different way. There were moments where the Nazis effectively could have gone into the dustbin of history, so to speak, where their fortunes were at a real low point, where they were caught in a cul-de-sac. They were trapped effectively. There was no way out for Hitler, and he was saved by other people. So the focus therefore needs to be, in some ways you could argue that the talents of other politicians were more important than Hitler's own talents. So, for example, we saw that in the summer of 1932, when the SA had been banned by General Groener. Hitler was saved by von Papen, who engineered a deal with Hitler that led to Groener's fall, that created a new Reichstag election opportunity for Hitler, and Hitler of course seized that opportunity by basically making a deal with von Papen and then breaking his terms of the deal after the Reichstag elections. Okay, so that you can see within that one event how Hitler was saved by another politician, but at the same time the way in which Hitler used that opportunity to his advantage as well. Now, in a sense, as we get to the end of 1932, December 1932, you've got, in a sense, a very, very similar situation. The Nazis were once again caught in a cul-de-sac. Remember, on the 6th of November, von Papen had engineered elections knowing that the Nazis would probably lose votes, and he was absolutely right. The Nazis lost 2 million votes, and their number of seats dropped from 230 seats to 196. They were still the largest party in the Reichstag, but that sort of sense of the Nazis were the party on the rise has now been broken. That myth has been dispelled. The Nazis now, arguably, have peaked and they're now on the wane. Add to that, they've gone through 5 different election campaigns in 1932. There's 2 Reichstag elections, one in July and one in November, 2 lots of presidential elections that Hitler has stood for, plus there was a round of state elections. What this basically meant is the Nazi Party was running out of money. And also, even though he's the leader of the largest party, he's no closer to the Chancellorship because he hasn't convinced President Hindenburg that he should become the Chancellor. So that's sort of the starting point, in a sense, is that at the end of 1932, the Nazis were really no closer to being in power than they had been in the spring of 1932. Yet, of course, we know as historians that changed. We know that within 6 weeks, Hitler was the Chancellor. So we've got to sort of be asking ourselves what brought about that change, what exactly was it? And of course, one of the arguments again is that the Nazis is that it was by no means inevitable. It was not bound to happen that Hitler would become the Chancellor. Events could have taken a completely different course. Okay, so that's the theme you need to be exploring in your answer. Let's get into the details then. Okay, so Schleicher on the 2nd of December was appointed Chancellor. Okay, I won't go into the details of that, we covered that in the previous lesson. Okay, but remember, part of the deal, part of the plan that Schleicher has got, his proposal to Hindenburg, was that as Chancellor he could achieve what von Papen had never achieved. Okay, von Papen, remember, the previous Chancellor, had run the country purely through presidential support. He had no support in the Reichstag at all. Okay, Schleicher, so von Papen had no popular basis for support, so von Papen could not pass laws through the Reichstag. Schleicher basically is saying to Hindenburg, if you make me Chancellor, I can pass laws through the Reichstag. And of course, Hindenburg had to basically listen to that proposal. What was Schleicher's plan? Well, he basically believed he could pass laws through the Reichstag because he believed he could split the Nazi Party. Okay, so again, looking at the key points that we've got here. So 3rd of December, Schleicher had a secret meeting in Berlin, okay, with Gregor Strasser. And basically, he offered the position of Vice-Chancellor to Gregor Strasser. Now, as we know, Gregor Strasser represented the pro-left wing, the pro-socialist aspect of the Nazi Party, and he was the spokesperson within the Nazi Party who represented the view of the disgruntled members of the Nazi Party who were frustrated by Hitler's all or nothing attitude, the sort of disenchanted wing of the party. And basically, Schleicher believed that he could split the party by offering Strasser the vice-chancellorship. Okay. Now, was that a viable plan? Well, probably yes, because when you look at Hitler's reaction when he got wind of the fact that Schleicher had had this meeting, that Chancellor Schleicher had a meeting with Gregor Strasser, Hitler was in a state of almost blind panic. Hitler summoned Gregor Strasser to a meeting at the Kaiserhof Hotel in Berlin on the 5th of December and instructed Strasser to stay loyal to him, not to accept Schleicher's offer. So that should say that should say Strasser. Okay. Strasser decided neither to challenge Hitler nor to accept Hitler's offer. Okay. Instead, he resigned from the Nazi Party and took himself off to Italy, to the Italian lakes, for a long holiday. Now, of course, what this then does is it presents a situation for historians to analyse, and it's a what if, okay, type scenario. It's what historians call counterfactual history. If Strasser had done something differently, what route would history then have taken? Would history have taken a different course? Now the argument is basically, what if Strasser had accepted Schleicher's offer? What if Strasser, rather than resign from the party and go on holiday to Italy, what if Strasser had basically said to Hitler, no, I will accept Schleicher's offer? Many historians believe that could have ended Hitler's political career at that particular point. The party would have become divided. Loyal deputies, members of the Nazi Party who supported Strasser would effectively have followed Strasser. The party would have become splintered. The left-wing aspect, the left-wing element of the Nazi Party would have formed another party. that effectively would have forced Hitler's hand. Maybe then Hitler would have been forced to try to seize power violently using the SA. Then there would have been a civil war, etc., etc. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities that could have happened. But basically, Hitler's policy of taking power legally would have collapsed. So it all hung on that thread. What would Strasser have done? But Strasser was indecisive. Okay, rather than accept Schleicher's offer, he chose to resign from the party, and thus Hitler was saved. So the Nazi Party held together. The 60 deputies, the 60 Reichstag deputies, members of the Nazi Party, who arguably would have followed Strasser, now rallied behind Hitler. So the party survived that challenge. On the other hand, Hitler was still no closer to the Chancellorship. So as we move into January 1933, the same old problems are there. Party finances were depleted. Hindenburg was determined to not make Hitler Chancellor. And Nazi fortunes in the most recent election have shown that their popularity has peaked and that they are now on the wane. So, putting all that aside, it's not good news for Hitler that Strasser stayed loyal. Okay, it's fortunate for Hitler, but nevertheless the Nazis are still trapped in that cul-de-sac. They are no closer to power than what they had been 6 months earlier, for example. Okay, so that therefore means that as historians we have to therefore really ask, well, what on earth happened in the final 6 weeks? What was different in January 1933 in particular that transformed the situation of the Nazi Party? Well, basically what it was Hitler was now saved by von Papen, who effectively was seriously disgruntled at the way that Schleicher had conspired to take the Chancellorship away from him. In short, von Papen wanted revenge. Remember, von Papen had been forced out of the Chancellorship by Schleicher, and the different factor that we have now is von Papen was motivated by revenge. And what we know is that on the 16th of December 1932, Papen gave a speech at a gentleman's club in Berlin. He criticised Schleicher's tactics of trying to split the Nazis, and he argued in this speech at the gentleman's club that the best solution now was to support a Hitler Chancellorship, and that if handled properly, Hitler could be persuaded to act responsibly in government. So for the first time, we're actually seeing somebody who is very, very close to President Hindenburg grabbing the bull by the horns and saying, actually, we need to offer the Chancellorship to Hitler. Up until now, we've only been prepared to offer him the Vice-Chancellorship, and that has not worked. Clearly now we need to give him the Vice-Chancellorship. So therefore, von Papen's attitude was a key factor. Okay, so that's the end of this podcast. We'll then, if following this, then if you move into podcast number 4, thank you.